What, Steve? I wonder if you should go log in right now. Sorry, everybody. Just gonna give Steve some quick announcement here. Go log in and go to the GoToWebinar and delete some of the old ones so that it can save. Otherwise, it's going to cut off.
Okay.
Yeah, but welcome everybody. My name is Jade Frey. I'm here with Steven Swenson. This is one of our Tax Sale Titans podcast where we cover a number of different topics here. In fact, we've got a pretty good lineup here for things that we're going to be covering tonight, and we're looking forward to that.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got some exciting things. I'm just deleting some now. So.
All right. Well, I'll tell you what. Keep at it there for a minute. Keep those, let's delete some of those so that we don't lose our ability to record this thing tonight here. Some of the things we're going to be talking about though, so we're going to look at a sale here that happened in Wisconsin. We're going to review some deals from that. After that, we'll discuss for the training tip. We're going to talk a little bit about GIS maps and GIS maps 101. You could say we're going to talk about how we use them and some of the different tools, features, things that that make them easier to use. After that, we are going to do a pre-sale review here of a DE. I'm guessing that's Delaware here, Steve?
Yep, Delaware, exactly.
And
we're going to go ahead and look at an upcoming Delaware auction. There's actually great opportunity there, and it's a better state. And we have a lot of students that are within that area, so it definitely makes sense to look into it.
Yeah, and we'll wrap things up with Q&A from our members.
Yeah, exactly. So first of all, we want to go ahead and give a shout out to all of our members, everyone on the call tonight, our coaching students. We also have a YouTube membership program that's $2.99 a month. If you're already a member, don't worry about it. You have access to more training than that, but it just gives them additional YouTube videos that are available. And so we just want to thank you guys all. We really do appreciate everyone that's following us.
Yeah, also, so we have another event scheduled here for March 6th through the 9th in Houston. This will be a full 3-day boot camp that we would love to have any of you out to. It's 3 full days. It includes lunches in there, and it gives us time to cover not only tax sales in greater depth, but also how it relates to other forms of real estate. And really, I think, well, we can cover so much stuff over the course of 3 days that, it's just so much more than what we can do in a single webinar. And so we would love to have any of you out.
Yeah, I think that I've deleted enough that we're good to go.
Oh, excellent. All right, well, good deal. Well, let's talk about a couple of the Wisconsin sales we're going to review here. And let's talk about Wisconsin as a whole here for a moment, and then I'm going to switch over to Steve. We're going to review some properties. So Wisconsin, they are a tax deed state, and the sales are conducted using premium bidding. So all of that is pretty familiar here. There are in some cases, counties may have opening bids set at a percentage of value, but if properties don't sell there when they have it set as a percentage of value, then they're going to lower those back down generally if the property doesn't sell. They may offer it around a second time at a lower price here. But in other words, they may have set it as their part of their state law that they're required to offer properties here initially for a certain percentage of value if it meets certain requirements.
Yeah, in fact, that's something that we're going to notice tonight. In fact, we're going to look at one property that, we noticed jumped down and kept jumping down in price until it sold for 30 grand, which was a great deal. But, what'll happen is some of these properties, they're going to offer up at a higher price and then they don't sell it. And so about every 2 or 3 months, they'll go ahead and reoffer the properties. And so we'll watch Wisconsin properties that don't sell and wait for the next sale to come out and see how much they've dropped it down. We see me generally dropping it down about 10 to 15,000, sometimes more than that, up to 30,000, depending on the property value. Now, most of the auctions, or at least the online auctions, are held by Wisconsin Surplus. They do still hold some live auctions, but there is a lot of opportunity through online auctions. They use a premium bidding method. Whoever wins, essentially the high bidder, will go ahead and win the property. Now, they will offer some over-the-counter properties, but then they'll also re-offer for sale, like I kind of explained and Shade explained before.
Yeah, which we're actually seeing that much more commonly now that counties have good online auction opportunity, I guess options you could say. We're seeing fewer of them that just have straight up over the counter properties, but what many of them have are subsequent sales that they put properties through in order to try to get them, sold. So it's changed a little bit from what it was. I mean, traditionally, over the counter really kind of started because counties just may not sell what they had, and so getting it after the sale maybe was the best option. But they don't really have to worry about that so much anymore, with so many other ways to get properties in front of us. And so, yeah, let's do this. I'm going to hand it over here to Steve, and we're going to go take a look at the sale.
Yeah, exactly. So we're going to go ahead and look at some different Wisconsin auctions that are coming up, and we're going to look at first at this one right here. Now, this is kind of an interesting property, and we're going to go through because I want to show you guys a bunch of different ones. So we're going to go through them kind of quickly. But this is this first property right here. Now, this one ended up selling for 60 grand. They had listed this property before for 80 grand and then 100 grand, and then it ended up selling for 60. Now, it's a little bit high, and we'll see what Shade thinks. But at 60,000, we're going to kind of look at what the comps are within the area and get a better idea of it. So here's the property for sale on you know on Zillow at 138,000. You can see that they're missing a lot of the information. So when you're looking in comps in the area, here's a couple of different comps. This one here is kind of similar. Ended up selling for 150,000. Looks about the same bedroom and bath. Now, one thing that is kind of interesting about these is they will provide with interior photos.
Yeah, which that's a huge benefit for us, as tax sale investors, to be able to get any kind of interior images of the property, is nice. It's a real benefit. And for 60,000, let's see. So we figure the value on it is maybe up on double that.
Well, and it's a duplex. And so when I was looking at duplexes, the duplexes were selling for, quite a bit more, probably like 250 to 3, but there wasn't a ton of different comparables. So this is kind of a duplex. It does need some work, you know, but kind of getting an idea of the condition. And then when you were to go back and look at, I thought that this property had some online photos, but maybe it's a different one. But I think I found some online photos, some interior photos on maybe Redfin or something. But based on this, you can kind of see that these are just single family homes that are roughly about the same size. This one, hadn't really been that rehabbed. This one here sold for about 160,000. So the fact that this is a duplex, I think if they were to rehab it about 180, that's where I said I'd probably be more comfortable at 40,000 with it. But it is kind of interesting to see what it sold for.
Yeah, well, the value is high enough to fix it up. I mean, if you were to put the money into the property, it would be worth it, and you'd make your money back out of it. I mean, they at 60,000, at least there's still room, to fix it up, in that price point on it, because they paid a pretty low percentage of value, and with it being a condo, again, if that increases that value there, that could change the numbers, the numbers as well. Because I mean, interior, it looks dry. I mean, it needs
You
a
can see
remodel here, but
you see kids got in here. But
mm-hmm.
yeah, you could do a lipstick rehab. What would probably do on this actually is just go ahead and maybe clear it out, clear up the title, and let somebody else rehab it. Unless we wanted to create a power team within that area. And then let somebody come in, we've got it cleaned out, we've taken out all of this junk, and and let somebody else rehab it. Or you could go ahead and rehab it and rent it out. I think you can rent them out for about $1,000 a piece. I think they're 2-bedroom, 1-bath. There may be a 3-bedroom, 1-bath and a 2-bedroom, 1-bath.
Well, and there is, again, there's always going to be a need for housing, and I'll bet there are not that many houses you can find. They're starting at about 60,000. you know, the numbers I think are probably going to work the more we would look at it. But that's something else we would, you know, try to figure out is what the market's like there in, you know, in its, you know, in Gillette, and you know, it could give us some idea. They're certainly not going to lose money though at 60,000. I don't think they're going to lose money on that though. I think they're going to be just fine.
Yeah, this one ended up selling, you know, it actually didn't sell at all. So this is going to get, I've seen this go down in price. I think it started at 80 grand. Now it's a 58, you know, and it'll probably go down until somebody decides it's good enough deal. But this one didn't get a bid on it, you know, and in looking at the property, you know, we can kind of look at some, and this is what's nice about this is a lot of these counties are providing interior photos of the property. So if we can get that, we can make a lot better decision, you know, based on the interior photos. That's probably the reasons why somebody said it's 60 grand. Well, I'm going to do a you know, it's going to cost me 20 grand to rehab it. If I can sell it for 180, I can still make, you know, 80 to 100 grand on it. See that they've added some new, you know, new sheetrock to it. So with this one, you can see how they've started doing a rehab on it. It just wasn't finished. And it's kind of a little bit weird house, but it's pretty clean inside.
And it's pretty simple too, you know, in terms of design and everything. It'd be easy to fix up. And it, you know, it's an eyesore right now. It would look much better there with even just having the front part of it finished.
Yeah, well, and you could clean it up. You've got a big porch there. You've also got, you know, I think you could sell it. Here's where, you know, they're estimating it out. Of course, they don't have any of the information in here. And I think it's a 4-bedroom in counting it, you know. Here's what was kind of interesting is this home here, you know, is a little bit smaller and, you know, kind of around the same age that sold for 269. Here's another property close to it that sold for 235, about the same size as well and older as well. So, you know, here's two comps where this property, and we'd look a little more into it, but just kind of looking quickly at the numbers, you know, here it didn't sell at 58,000 and rehabbed, you know, properties within a quarter mile of this property that are about the same size, about the same age, sold for 269 and 235.
Yeah. So in that range, you know, yeah, there would be some profitability when it comes up again. You know, at lower prices, you know, you have to wonder here at what point, you know, it would it be worth, you know, grabbing and. Yeah, at what price, you know, it would it be, you know, would it be worth going after and trying to sell? And you know, if they're bringing it down from 58,000, that number is going to come up. I mean, I wonder what they'll lower it to next time.
Probably additional 10,000. Well, if you look at it, it's dry.
Yeah.
You know, I'd look a little more into the market, but you can see how they've already even, I mean, even paying for all that, they just need to finish the sheetrock there. You know, there's, you know, that's all been re-sheetrocked. I mean, there's just a lot done to it where you can rehab the property. In fact, we're going to look at a little one that I love even more here in a minute, but we'll look at one more property here quick. And it's this one right here. You know, you can see it ended up opening at 51, and they had dropped this property down as well. Usually they'll kind of drop down to where they're, you know, 25, 30 cents on the dollar, and then if it's good enough, it'll sell at that point. Sold for 72. And you can get land for cheaper than this here, but these are kind of some of the homes. You know, this one's actually located, you know, right next to this river. You know, this lot borders the county or government property that, you know, right there. So it's right next to. So it's really kind of in a nice area. There's a bunch of nice homes here. I think it was built in the 70s. You know, here's the property right now on Zillow, you know, and they're missing all of this information, which really kind of affects what the actual market value is. But you know, they're estimating about 204,000. You know, here's a comp that's similar sized, close by, sold for 279. Oh, that's the same one. That's the same one.
There's definitely money.
Yeah.
Values high enough that it could make sense.
I had the same one, but there was another comp that was about one that sold for about 300 that was similar as well. So, you know, this one's actually really nice next to that river, which at 77,000, I think it's probably worth, once they redo it, it'll be worth, especially with that big lot, you know, 275 to 300. And, you know, will probably be a pretty good one that they picked up.
Yeah, well, like the one before that, at 60,000, at 72, yeah, I think the numbers work there just fine.
Yeah. On these ones real quick. So here's an auction, another auction that's coming up. We won't look into this one. This one sold for, this one actually bid it up. You can see it started at 232. As is, it's worth about 400. Fixed up and rehabbed, they're selling for about $500,000. But the one I was kind of interested in, this property right here, you can see it sold for quite a bit, a lot of money, 80,000, and it's 6.4 acres. But this is in a really nice area and it borders the river.
Yeah, this looks like a nice property.
Yeah. Kind of see some of the homes that are next to the area. And this is one of the biggest lots if we were looking there at the lot. And it, you know, it's 5.5 acres or whatever it was.
Yeah, it
You
looks pretty dry too, and
know,
pretty usable.
yeah, the bank kind of goes up, so you know you are a ways from the river. And here's, no, let's see. You know, here's different comps for properties right here. So here's, you can see this is 4.2 acres, but it doesn't go next to, you know, it doesn't border the river. The river's further down. You know, it's for sale for 380. This property here, which isn't next to the river but close to the area, you know, is 5 acres, sold for 260. And here's another 5 acre lot within a mile or so that sold for 300.
Yeah,
So
at 80,000, it's a good buy at 80,000. And I think it only got one bid. I mean, the opening bid was 80,000, and so it sold for that opening bid amount. But they did pretty well here on it. And unlike the homes, they don't really have to look at at rehab costs or any of that stuff. They may clear the title on the property, get a warranty deed on it. But the value of the property is inherent just in what it is.
yeah, and it may be possible to do commercial, but I think what you could probably do is, and you could really go further back, you know, further back into that and build your home further back. So you wouldn't need to necessarily do off this street. You've got such a big lot there that uh, you know, you could really build a nice home. I think this property, what we would do if we purchased this for 80 is would spend a few grand going through quiet title and then would list it for probably 350,000. I mean, this has got all of that acreage along the river, big large lot, and even at 80 grand, they're going to be able to make quite a bit of money on it.
Yeah, that's a pretty good win there for a property at its opening bid amount.
Yeah, I think there was one more that was kind of interesting on here.
5 acres for 22.
Yeah, this one here is kind of interesting, and this is the one I told you about that during the webinar that we were going to talk about, that we would send neighbor letters to. So here's this lot located right here, and see all of those neighbors. These are all $500,000 homes, and so if I was going to buy this property, the very first thing I do, if we picked it up for 22, I would send a letter to every single one of these people, almost kind of create a bidding war. Whoever buys it first, because all of these people, I mean, these are $500,000 homes. If they could know they could have 5 acres, keep anyone from building there. One of these, you know, if you sold it to them for 60 grand, I think one of these people would buy it in 60 grand within a week.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. You do have a pretty good pool there of people that have direct tie to the property and it's not that much money even at that.
Yeah. Well, and as you get further back in there, there's some wetland over here. But from everything I can see, I would kind of went and looked up here, it all looks dry, but you could obviously try selling it as well. In fact, I've got a couple of comps so we can look at. Here's the property itself. They're valuing it at 300 grand. That's Redfin. And here are two comps in the area. Sold for 340. This one sold for 297. And Zillow, you can see this is the 5.21 acre lot. This is that lot right there that they're valuing it at 300,000.
Interesting. That's good value.
Yeah. Even if it has issues, and I don't know if it would look more into the deed and buying it, but it's all of the land, like just a building lot, a quarter acre, well, the most of them are about a third an acre or half an acre. The building lots within this area are all going for 150 to 100 to 200,000. It's expensive for this area in this particular city, in this area. Lots are just really outrageous. And so if you could buy all this land, that's where I said you could probably sell it to a neighbor pretty quickly, just based on how many different neighbors you have that would probably like to get their hands on it.
Yeah, well, and based on the values for the property being as high as they are, I mean, you're only $22,000 into that lot. It's not going to cost too much.
No.
Yeah, and that would be a bargain there for 60,000 to be able to pick up 5 acres that are directly attached to your property. Yeah, I think you'd get a buyer pretty fast.
Yeah, this is kind of an interesting one as well. This one's sold for a pretty good price. I think it's valued about 160. But the one that I wanted to look at was this one right here that sold for 74,000.
Oh wow.
So it's 24 acres. And again, they're providing us with great photos. It's this lot right here, and there's homes through here. There's a bunch of homes kind of in cabins in this area. It's actually pretty close to town. Right over here is kind of a smaller town.
Does the county have any value attached to it?
It's kind of all this, and there's kind of a little creek that runs through here, and that's where there's kind of a house right there as well. So here's where the property is located. It kind of starts right here where this house is at, and then goes all the way to past here, and then it comes up, and there's this house right here kind of is cut out, and then it goes all the way back here. So it's like, all of this. And it does kind of have like a little road that goes back there as well. But in looking at, here's the lot. You can see the 24 that Zillow is saying is worth 119. But when you look at the market values of properties, that's really where we're going to get what the actual value is. So this one's, I couldn't find any that were 27, but there was bunch of 40 acres right around this area. So, this one, you can see they only valued it at 140, but it sold for 450. And this one, this particular one doesn't have the frontage, that the other one does.
Yeah, 450 is quite a bit more there.
279.
Yeah, you can see the prices have come up here recently.
Yeah, so whatever Zillow's saying, they're selling for quite a bit. I mean, whatever Redfin is saying, they're actually selling for quite a bit more. 364, and that one sold for 600. So, there's 4 different pieces of property located right around here that are a little bigger in size. The cheapest one sold for about 300. Most expensive sold for about 600. So even even though they paid quite a bit for it, it still makes a lot of sense, and you can see why somebody did pay for that. Because let's say that they're into it total by the 80 grand, maybe they kind of have a survey done or something like that, and then they turn around and sell it for 300 to 500. you know, make a pretty good profit on it.
Yeah, yeah, it's as good as you can hope for through any deal, and that's a pretty good deal just for that much acreage anyway.
Yeah, in fact, we'll just look at a couple more. I had a whole ton, but we don't want to spend the whole time. But it is kind of interesting. I just kind of went back and looked. You can see that this one didn't sell for 80,000. And my biggest concern about this one, I wasn't planning on looking at it. We'll just look at it really quickly. Is just the gas tanks. If it didn't
Yeah,
have gas tanks, because the interior is real nice. I mean, it looks like they just, and I think there might be a house next to it as well. But
yeah, it looks like it's still in operation. It could
yeah,
be.
yeah. I don't know if it was kind of a little grocery store, fishing store, but it's got everything in there to go. I would just you need to find out from the EPA about the tanks. But the property we're going to look at, not that one. It's this one right here. In fact, I think we might have looked at this back with our coaching students a few months back. But this was kind of an interesting property to me, because this started at 90,000 and ended up dropping down to 30,000, and that's when it finally sold. Now, obviously, you can see that, the exterior, there's things that need to be done, but it was right in the middle of a rehab.
Yeah, or like was it it's not a new construction, right? It was like a remodel.
Yeah, it's a remodel. I think it was built in the 90s.
Okay.
And so you can see how they were going in and they were remodeling everything.
Yeah, I mean they did. Looks like they took it uh, down to the sheetrock in a lot of places.
Yeah, exactly. And kind of opened it up. I don't know what the black is all about, but you could really brighten this particular home up. And they've done a bunch. You can see they have the new tile.
Oh
You
yeah,
know,
they've got the ceiling lighting too. They look like they have canned lighting in there.
yeah. So you'd obviously have to put in new siding. They've got a bunch of new windows. There's some windows that need to still be replaced. You know, um, but it's overall clean. It's dry. It's in a really nice area. And so I think, let's say that you were even to put in 50, 80 grand in rehabbing it, you just need, except for the exterior, you just need to put in paint, finish putting in appliances, putting in carpet, but the frame itself, like Shade said, it's even got, the new lighting put in. So everything's done to finish this project. In fact, if we would have been, I was watching it, but if we would have been more prepared, I would have loved to bid on this property.
Yeah, at 30,000. Yeah, there's a lot of potential profitability in a house that big too. That it's got a lot of new stuff in it, and it doesn't show any obvious, reasons or signs, that would warn you away from it. I mean, it's got to have a tremendous value.
Yeah, and so I was just looking for the closest sales next to this property. This obviously isn't the same thing. This is a prefab, but it sold for 110. It's on a smaller lot as well, but I'd gone,
No,
it's close by.
210.
Yeah, 210, sorry. Sold for 210, said it's valued about 240, and it's still kind of original, cabinet, it's just kind of all kind of is what it is, but not a bad little property, but really not a great comp because they're different type. This one was still needed to kind of be rehabbed, sold for 200,000. But I think once you rehab the property, here's one that sold for 170 that was close by, but this is just a tiny little, uh,
Two
you know,
bedroom, one bath.
yeah, I mean, it's just a tiny little house, but you can see how they're selling. Here's one that sold for 281, which I think if you put in a nice level of rehab, you could be in the 250 range on this particular house.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of, boy, that's really a low percentage of value, that it sold too, right? For 30,000.
Yeah, it sold for 30,000. But the other one's on a bigger lot. It's a big, huge lot. This is obviously nice. They put a lot of work into this, and so this is obviously nicer than probably we would redo that home. But you know, kind of based on what some of these are selling for, a little teeny thing like this. I think
Yeah,
it's all, you know,
I
it's
mean,
only 800 square feet. You
yeah, I
know,
mean,
here,
we saw properties for ranging from 140 up to 300,000 essentially there. You can kind of get an idea of where this would fit in.
yeah. So even if you were into 130,000, I mean, say you paid 100,000 into rehabbing it, making it beautiful, you know, you're into a total of 130,000. You could still sell it for 250, and that's putting 100,000 into it. If you put in 50 or 60,000, you know, maybe it's 10,000 to redo the siding, maybe more than that. You know, the roof is good. You don't need to put in a whole lot of, you know, you're gonna have to put in some carpet, but you've already got the tile put in. You know, you've got so much of the work done, and you know what you're getting into. So, you know, I think that this person probably is gonna nail it out of the park.
Yeah, I mean, they paid 10% of value, on a home like that. That's, I mean, with homes valued as high as that with the potential, it's just hard to find. So yeah, they could probably turn around and sell that property without doing anything at all and make a return on it. But if they do take it through and fix it up, yeah, they could make a substantial amount on that.
Yeah, you know, I found this kind of interesting, and I think that they overpaid for it when I first even looked at it. I said, they kind of overpaid, but they're still going to make a really good profit, I think. You know, they ended up paying 97,000 for it. Um, as you look into the property, you can kind of see it was actually in really not too bad a shape. You know, the siding, the roof, all of that stuff is good. See how there's been a little bit of vandalism, probably some kids in there, but fairly clean. And you can see how it has all these hardwood floors. You can see kind of that tile here that where they kept that, because this is currently on the market. So somebody bought this property.
Yeah, they did pay a lot considering, that it's full of stuff there and need of rehab. But yeah, I
Yeah,
can see how they went. I mean, there's nothing, we haven't seen any major problems here with it. It's
yeah. So here's the property currently for sale. They've had it on the market for about a month. You can see here that they listed it for sale on January 15th for 179,000, and within 30 days they've already dropped it down to 169,000. But in looking at the property, you can see exactly what they did. So I think that they're probably into the rehab 20 grand, because they didn't have to do any of this. They just cleaned up the yard really well. The roof was still good. They didn't even repaint any of this. They just cleaned it up. You can see that they added some new stuff here, but these are all the original cabinets. And all of this woodwork right here was actually still in the property. And then what they did is they sanded down that wood floor, but that's the tile that we saw that was originally in there. But you can see how just cleaning the property up, painting it, and then resanding the floor and putting on a darker gloss, cleaning out the basement, this repainted it, you know.
well, it turned out pretty nice, and it's probably the cheapest, 3 bedroom, 2 bath, setup that they're going to get at that kind of a price point. And
Yeah,
so it will sell. It's just a matter of time, because they're right there in that price range where your entry level housing. And what's nice about that one is that that one's completely remodeled here. It's a new remodel, and so everything on it is new on the inside. Yeah, I think they'll find a buyer here before long at that price.
I thought they had some additional
I
photos.
you know I like the stuff they did on the outside of the property to clean up. I mean, I think they had to have new steps built maybe on that
You know,
back corner.
I don't, I don't think they did. I think they just cleaned it up. I think it's the same color. They put some color there, and they may have added that, but I think that you see how it's still that red paint there. They
Mhm.
just they added this railing right here,
Yeah, yeah, it really
but
wasn't much
but
worth it. It was,
all of this woodwork here was originally in the home.
yeah, they just took advantage of it and used it.
Yeah, you know, and so let's say that they put in, they've got it listed right now for 170. Um, let's say that they're able to get the 170 for it, you know, if they put in 20 or 30 grand, they're going to make between 30 to 60 grand on it.
Yeah.
Maybe a
Yeah. So
little bit.
yeah, they did overpay, but they'll still be profitable on it, and they're still going to make money on it. They've still done pretty well.
Yeah. Well, I'll go ahead and turn this over to you. There's a bunch more you can look at. This was kind of one that sold for 73, and it's definitely a different property, but in its commercial property, it's an older, like a senior center, but it's clean.
Yeah, a lot of good potential with that property.
Yeah, so I'll go ahead and pass this back to you. But there's a ton of good opportunity in Wisconsin. Hopefully you kind of understand how it works there and kind of see some of the properties that we're selling.
Yeah, those are very interesting properties. Yeah, I kind of like that last uh,
Oh,
retirement center, whatever it was.
yeah. Uh-oh. There we go. Back to you now.
All right, good deal.
So now what we're going to do is we're going to talk about GIS maps. We're going to go look at some of the maps that are out there, some of the features that are available. But really, this is a game changer. And for most people, they don't realize that. But for me and Shade, we started when we were using plat maps. And, it was a lot more difficult finding property, especially if the property didn't have an address. And a lot of you guys are starting looking at land. And so, this is such a helpful tool, but just not only finding the property, but also all the other tools that are available with GIS maps.
Yeah, really, the way they combine information in a lot of cases, it could be the first record you pull up, and you could probably save time with it, just because now they're not only providing us with the property boundaries from overhead, but they provide us with a complete overview of the property. I mean, its assessment information is basically all listed there, along with anything else that's going to be relevant to it, and we could link directly to those if we wanted to from this place as well. But we got into a habit of checking, the GIS every time on properties to avoid making mistakes. Uh, we've oftentimes seen people make mistakes where, and sometimes it's even the county could have something wrong with the way that they have something listed. And ultimately, the only way you really know what it is that you are buying is if you pull it up there on the GIS and can see where the boundaries are, for the property, make sure that it's accessible, make sure it's the right property, that it's not, a different one that is that's being advertised. We use GIS to kind of check all of these things here with properties, to make sure that they are what they say they are. Because ultimately this is the source the county is using. This is going to be the ultimate source for truth that we're going to, that we're going back to. So yeah, when it was just plat maps, it was so challenging, and now not only can we identify the property, but we have all of these other tools that are kind of built into it that allow us to see other things like, we can plug in different years of overhead images on the properties. We can plug in floodplains or topographical maps. A lot of times we can see like water features or utilities on some of these. There are so many different, whether there be base maps, that can help us, or tools within the layers on these maps. There, we can learn a lot from them and essentially help avoid making mistakes as a result of the information that's here. So always fall back on the information here, like the GIS mapping for the property that shows us exactly what it is.
Yeah, well, these maps help us determine accessibility to public road. Looking at this one, we can see that there's actually 2 different roads or street access to this property, really kind of 3. We can look at the neighborhood and zoning. It kind of looks like it's maybe semi-commercial property. We can see residential property just up ahead. So this is kind of commercial property that's close to residential property. Does the size look like it's similar to other lots? Well, this actually looks like it's kind of a bigger lot. We can also see if there's any type of water features or drainage issues. This is obviously a structured property that's not going to apply. But just even looking at this one GIS map, we can tell quite a bit about the property just looking at where the property boundaries are, what the property includes, and the surrounding property as well.
Yeah, in fact, it gives us kind of the quickest snapshot of what the property is accurately, and allows us to be able to make a decision on it. But there are other records we can also use. In fact, it's not the only type of tax map. In some cases, there are also different viewers or lot viewing software that they have that may be different from the actual GIS system that pulls up. In fact, we can kind of see that the oblique image viewer versus a tax map. That's kind of the difference between what those two are. One of them, just has images of properties here, overhead images, I'm guessing taken from airplane. And one of them actually pulls up the GIS map, and they're two separate tools.
Yeah, sometimes it's called a bird's eye view. In fact, we really don't use it a lot. Like Shade said, it's usually taken from an airplane, and sometimes it's a little bit on an angle where the satellite map is just straight overhead. But, there's all of different types of tools that we can use on the GIS maps. Now, some are going to be a little bit more basic, but most have a lot of additional tools and layers. Now, that could be either in base maps or it could be in a layer section. It'll kind of depend on the GIS map, but even looking at this one, we can see we have, image, street, topographical, different years of cells, different satellite images, or different years of satellite image. In fact, we use that a lot to determine if there used to be a home on a lot. We can go back and see, oh, well, there's no home on the property in the 2024 satellite image, but if we look back in 2021, there was a home. So we know that, there used to be a home on this property, and now that home has been demoed.
Yeah, these are just what the plat maps essentially look like. And if you ever have to work with plat maps, they may not have the proper the property actually highlighted or identified for you when you're looking at it. You may need to figure out where it's at through the legal description, on the property. And if even then, if you can find the property, the property within the lot, you can use this to make good decisions. I mean, we've bought properties based on plat maps before. If we can find information like where the property lines are at, and then we can compare this map to another map. Like, let's say we can go from what we can see here, and then we'll pull up something like Google Maps with the closest cross streets. We can still make good decisions with plat maps. We just don't have that interactive nature that, and it's also not nearly as fast. It generally takes us a lot longer to make sense of plat maps versus GIS that allow us just to fly right through it. And so the main reason though ultimately is so we can try to compare it to other maps and get additional images of the property. We're basically trying to gather more information that will tell us what is going on with the property and what it is.
Yeah, with plat maps, a lot of times they may have just the lot number. So you look, like Shade talked about, looking in the legal description, you'll see, okay, this is lot number 27, or in that case, the property that's highlighted there to the left, that's lot 31. And so we would kind of know where that is. But you can see the one on the left-hand side and the one on the right-hand side are both highlighted, but the one in the middle isn't. So with that, we'd probably have to look at that lot number to determine where the plat map is. In fact, we've kind of had a strategy for years where there's some areas in Arkansas where they don't have plat maps. I mean, where they don't have the GIS map for that particular lot. Maybe they have most of the county, but in that area they don't. Well, in that case, we've tracked down plat maps and are able to determine, hey, this is actually a good lot. And, most people avoided it because they didn't have that GIS map. So if they don't have that available, probably 99% of the people are not going to look into it. And it's possible it could still be a good piece of property. But like Shade mentioned, we're going to use the plat maps in addition with using Google Maps. We kind of use both of these tools at the same time because they both are going to complement each other in different ways.
Well, and what we're able to gather is, I guess, information that's different ages and different kinds of information. So we can look at overhead images with Google Maps to see, the overhead image from a different time frame. But what we're really after when we're looking at the overhead images, I guess, I wanted to see if there's anything that's different. But it's to see if there are street side images available and when those street side images were taken. That's kind of the main thing that we're trying to figure out or find, just because an overhead map is helpful, but a street side image is also helpful in helping us determine things about the property. And so that's what we're looking for, is access to street side imaging on the property. And that's kind of what we're going to check on Google for. We're going to see if we can pull up the nearest cross streets, we can locate the property, and then we're going to see what kind of street side image that we can obtain. And once we've got that, we're going to look at when the street side image was taken. So we're going to see how old it is, so we can get an idea of whether or not it's going to be accurate. But what's also nice is that we can look at not only our property in greater detail, the one we're trying to evaluate, but we can see what the neighborhood looks like, what the neighboring properties look like, and we can get a better feel for the market in that area based on things that we can see.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go on and look at a couple of upcoming auctions, look at some of the tools that are available within the GIS map. In fact, one of the secrets that we're going to show you tonight is how to be able to use some of these maps to find sales information. And so we talk about looking at comps. What another way to be able to find good comparable properties so that you can determine the market value is by using the county maps and some of their mapping tools.
Yeah, all right, so let's take a look here at some different properties. We have different properties that are scheduled for auction still. This is the sale that's scheduled for March 19th that we're looking at. So let's pull up the property record.
Yeah, in fact, kind of the thing I wanted to highlight on this particular property, Shade, is if you scroll down a little bit further, we can see the GIS map actually comes up there automatically, but as we scroll down, we're going to see the comparable sales over on the left-hand side. So here's the featured tools. Look at all of these different links that we can click on that'll tell us, additional information. But if we click on the comparable sales, this is going to be an incredibly helpful tool. So right here, you can see this is just for 2026, but go back up to the top, Shade. And click on 2025. That's going to be really kind of most relevant. They're probably just starting to get the homes, and then you might have to click that search button.
Well, you can see there's a lot of sales there that happened in 2025.
Yeah, you click on them, or down there below they have listed them there as well. But here are a bunch of different properties that have sold within this area. We can see what they sold for. Some of them are going to be family type transfers, like $100 life estate interest. Those aren't really going to be ones that we're going to obviously use as comparables because they're just selling them to themselves. But maybe that $705,000 one, that may be a good comparable that we can use, and we can look into the information and see exactly what it sold for.
Yeah, in fact, and that is a handy tool in that, it just basically, it draws a circle for us, quarter mile. We could change that as well if we wanted, if we were looking for additional properties, but it also kind of, we can see what the price range is on the property. So we can tell that any of the ones that are in blue basically sell for nothing. They're like family transfers or changes, to some degree. So the blue ones are not, well, they're transactions, but they're not normal sales. All the other ones, are the ones that we'll see, that we could click on to see what the actual, sales price was on the property. So any of these, like, looking there, we've got that one for 705,000, or we have, two here, which, somehow that's one. Oh, that was a corrective deed as well. Even number two is. Let's
Well,
see.
you can also go up to the top, Shade, I believe, go a little further up, and I think you can click on the different colors. So you can click on 325 to, can you click on that? Maybe you can't. Or maybe you can select property that way over on the left-hand side. No, maybe not. But, it does help. And every one of them is a little bit different, but it's going to be very kind of similar to this, where you can kind of pull up different properties within the area that have sold.
Yeah, in fact, yeah, these are all pretty handy tools here. Let's do another one here. Interesting. So this one is actually commercial.
It almost looks like a parking lot or something.
Well,
What was?
this was a demolition. It had to be,
Yeah, it had to be a demo.
it had to be a demo of one of the ones just across the street from it. Something, it must have been something
Oh,
similar
wait.
to those.
It says the unit 1212. I wonder if it's a parking unit. No, it's probably because that's kind of interesting. It's not. It looks like it's that whole area, but maybe it's a parking. Oh, look, living area 730 square feet.
Built
That's
in
odd.
1968, annexed in 2004. But it's only valued at 43 taxable value. I mean, this thing, it had
Something's
to,
wrong with it.
yeah, I think it had a demolition that was done on it. And
Is there anything underneath the card down there below that says? See foreclosure. I wonder if it's one of the condos to the right or something. I don't know. Something doesn't make sense about it.
yeah, let me see what the property address is here. And see if I can pull that up. Well, in the amount, so the amount's fairly large too. I guess it's only $8,000 on that one.
We can go look at that other auction too as well and use some of their tools. These are, the GIS map within here. I just kind of wanted to show the sales feature on this when we can go look at some land on that other auction, the Washington sale. And, this is really where it can be helpful. I mean, obviously the GIS map's helpful with structured property as well. But where it's really helpful is when we're looking at land. If we can't see something like a street side image, let's say it's in a more rural area, that's where we're going to use things like the topographical maps, the flood maps, some of those different tools that are available on the GIS maps to help us make a good informed decision. In fact, one of the properties that we show, sometimes when we're teaching during the 3-day is a property in Beverly Hills that, is right in the right zip code. I mean, you're talking about, there in Beverly Hills, it's in a great area, but it's located and it's pretty much located on a cliff. There's a 170-foot drop in about 230 feet length. And so it goes almost straight down. Somebody paid $100,000, for a property that's 100% unusable.
Man, all right. So here we can see we've got the GIS here telling us, where this property is located at, which we could use the closest cross streets if we want to pull it up and see if we have any street side images on it, which, there may be, but it doesn't look like it's, like it's ever been clear. It looks naturally landscaped.
Yeah, you can see how there's different aerial photos that we could go back and look. You can also, on the left-hand side underneath the layers, click underneath the yearly sales and see what properties sold within the area as well. So that's something that we'll always look at.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. That is kind of handy here. We can see, this one right here sold.
Scroll out a little further.
Oh, yeah. There's a lot of them that sold here. Yeah, including some of the ones, that are right near. So I think it's actually this property right here. This is the one that's being sold. Well, you can see here that so we have for different years.
Yeah, well, and this one actually has, I was quickly trying to see, this one actually has less tools than others. Sometimes they'll have additional links that we can click on. We can go look and see if they have additional layers here. But where you can look at, floodplains, or you can look at, even something like utilities, where they'll have different types of utility maps they can come in. But even with this, we can see, okay, here's where the lot dimensions are at. what does it look like in conjunction to the other pieces of land, and also seeing some of the land that's sold within this area to get an idea of what the market value is.
Yeah, what's nice, but this is also just knowing, that when some of the sales here took place. So we know that, we've got in the purple, we've got 2025 sales, in the lighter color 2021. And green is 2024. And so, between the green and purple, you actually have, some pretty recent sales that have also occurred here that we could look at, and lots that are going to be, quite a bit smaller. I mean, these both 15,000.
Yeah, and last week during the podcast we talked about how to make sure it's a buildable lot or not. And so that's something we would go ahead and make sure. They look like they're buildable lots. We can see that other properties are sold within the area, but we want to make sure before we fork out our investment. So we're going to check the zoning within this particular subdivision and just make sure that it's a buildable lot. We don't want to just assume it is. I do kind of think that it is. If I was a betting man, I'd bet on it, but I'm not gonna bet when we're talking about investments. We're gonna make sure by looking into more of the information.
Yeah, 100%. Now, here's a property that doesn't have as high of a value, and that could be a red flag here right off the bat. Let's see. So this is our image here. Let's pull it up and see what it tells us here. Now, the size on it, I cannot quite see. Oh, here we go. It's 0.35, acre. And we still have the other sales here that are pulled up right there near it.
There's a bunch of 2025 sales right next to it. What did that sell for? Does it say?
5,000.
No, that's the value. That's the assessed value.
Let's see.
Oh, $10,000. It's down in the bottom.
Okay, let's see here.
Down sold for 6,000. Yeah, you can see over on the left-hand side what they sold for. If the opening bid was a little bit less, it may be worth it. But kind of looking at it, that sold for 94,000.
Oh, there's a house underneath there, I think.
12,000. So they're valued between 6 to 12, probably. But you can see the different sales dates there. But
Yeah,
they really can be helpful, and a lot of them are going to have even more tools than this one. This is a pretty basic one.
20 acres there sold
For 365,000.
Yeah, and the last sale there. No, that is handy. I like GIS systems like this that provides with a lot of information on each one of the properties that come up. I mean, it's basically there on whichever one we pull up. We've got a bunch of data here, and we could, if we wanted a specific data on a property there, we could pull it up right here.
Yeah, in fact, kind of another quick tool. Go back to that real quick, Shade. Is we can use it to find other properties as well. So click off that yearly sales real quick. And let's say that this one here doesn't have an exact address, and I kind of want to know where this property is. Well, if there's a home next to it, I would scroll out a little bit, and this one's kind of its own area. But let's say that there was a home next to it, I would go ahead and click on one of the other homes. This is probably why they only have them valued at 2,000, because there's not a lot of homes in the area. But you can click on that structured property that we see up there and get an address from there, and it'll pull up the address, and then I'll use that address to know pretty close to where this property is located. So, that's kind of one of the tools that we use. That's a cell tower. That's an easement property. See, cell tower.
Oh yeah, that's kind of interesting.
So
Yeah.
you see the land uses utility. That's a, you know, sometimes they'll sell these kind of properties in the tax sale, and you've got to, you can see that somebody ended up buying it. I don't know why they bought it. Maybe they own the property there, but the grantee, was some telecommunication.
Yeah, well, and it was sold as improved. That was probably a transfer, like a management transfer, that was done here on it when it went in there last.
Sold at the tax sale because they got an easement. You can't do anything with it. But let's go and jump back, and we'll talk about Delaware now, and kind of go through some Delaware properties, some Delaware auctions, and talk about how Delaware works. There really is a good opportunity. They're all on-site auctions. So if you live within this area, I think it's worth it to look at the Delaware sales. This time we're going to be looking at Newcastle County and an auction that's coming up on May 10th.
March 10th.
March 10th, excuse me.
Yeah, so Delaware officially is classified as a redemption deed state. So full ownership rights aren't actually granted to the deed holder until the redemption period has expired. And Delaware has a 60-day redemption period on the property. So basically for 60 days there following the sale, there is the possibility or the chance the property could redeem. If it does redeem though, then you get a 15% flat penalty rate that would pay out on it. So again, if you paid $1,000 for a property, and it redeemed within that 60 days, you would get back your $1,000 plus a 15% flat rate of return on it.
Yeah, that's what's great about Delaware is we're only looking at a 60-day redemption period. Now, at the tax sale, they're going to hold both mortgage foreclosures and tax sale foreclosures in the same auction. So as you go to the auction, you'll be able to tell the difference, and we'll show you when we look at the list on what qualifies as a tax sale property and which one qualifies as a bank foreclosure. Now, the opening bid is going to start at the delinquent taxes, penalties, and fees, and it's going to bid up using a premium bid system like any type of auction. But one thing that is really nice is that only 60-day redemption period, and then actually starts not on the day of the sale, but when the tax deed was approved of, the foreclosure was approved of, which is generally anywhere between a week to 3 weeks before, a month before the sale. So at that point, that's actually when the redemption period starts. So what we're going to do now is jump on. We're going to look at a couple of upcoming auctions. We're going to look into the county record information and evaluate some of the sales that are coming up in the Delaware auction. Oh my goodness. That didn't give you the right one. They must have, the links must have happened something with, let me go ahead and find that for you.
Is this not it?
It kind of gave you oh, there, now it pulled up. Yeah, okay, good.
Yeah, all right, so we're looking at the Newcastle here.
Yeah, and we can go up to the sales data up at the top and click on the date. So on the right hand side, we can go ahead and click on the 310 auction, and it's going to pull up all of the properties that are coming up. And then we've got to click search on the top left. So here underneath the plaintiff, we can see the different plaintiffs. And so there, first we can see US Bank. Well, that's obviously going to be a bank. And as we scroll down the list, eventually we're going to either see something about a city or something from the county level. So as we scroll down, you can see that these are all going to be banks, different banks. These are going to be bank foreclosures. Then we can see Newcastle County. So all of these properties are essentially going to be tax sale properties. We have 3 here. I think there's a couple of more. There's some city of Wilmington auctions coming up next month. And we have the parcel number there. We have the address. If you click on the details, it kind of has the same information as well as we can see there. But really what's going to be most important for us is the address and obviously that parcel number. So they have a parcel search tool that's pretty easy to find. I think that we have that link shade for you as well, that we can go ahead and research the parcel number along with looking into the address on the property as well. So here's their parcel search tool. It's pretty easy to find. I just typed in Newcastle County, Delaware parcel search, and the very first link was the parcel search tool for looking at properties in this area. Click on the details. You know, one thing that kind of worried me first is you can see that there was a demolition underneath the permit history. So you can see some of the different, there's a plumbing and heating, residential addition. All of this can be incredibly helpful for us, but I wanted to look at that demolition because automatically that's a bit of a red flag. But if we click on the details, we can see what kind of demolition it is.
Have an in-ground pool.
Yeah. So this is them doing things right. They got a permit. They had the pool demolished or taken out. Everything passed. You can see it passed. So in that case, you know, we're pretty good. That's not a demolition of the property, and you know, we kind of know what that is. We could also look at some of the additions that they put on. I didn't look at any of them, but that's going to tell us more about the property. We can see maybe when it was upgraded or when different things were done.
Yeah, yeah, we can see that it did pass there. This was in 2017. This was replacing the plywood on the roof.
That's good to know. You know, that means that since this property, they've replaced the plywood, and they probably also at that time would have had to replace the roof as well if they replaced the plywood.
Yeah, this was a warm air furnace. You know, back when they did that. And this is clear back. The residential addition is probably old. Let's see. Heating, cooling ramps.
Back in 2006. So we do know that there's been some work on the property. You know, they have if there's any type of code violations, they have it listed there, which this property doesn't have. We also have the GIS map at the top. We get an idea of kind of the value of the property, valued at about $387,000 on 0.2 an acre. We can see some of the sales information. Looks like it's sold in 2010, and then for some reason they don't have the sell date available on the most recent sell. But oh, it's within the same. See how it's the same person.
Yeah.
Alexander went on to it.
And we can see a historical value of the property here. That's the tax bills. And tax payments here. This is a pretty detailed assessment record here.
Yeah, so here's kind of where the opening bid would be. You know, we can see the county balance due and the school balance due. So this property is going to start at about 45 plus 15 will be around the opening bid amount. And then we can go and look at the property value. I mean, that's going to be quite a bit, you know, $70,000, $65,000 opening bid. You know, we'll have to see what the property is valued at to see if that makes sense. But we can do that pretty quickly by looking up the property address and seeing and doing a quick check of market value.
So this is our house right here. And so that's from May of 2012. About when that image came from, but at the time, it was in decent shape here. It looks like usable shape, and it looked like it was being used, and it also has a wheelchair accessible ramp there on the side that we can see.
Yeah, a little bit older photo, but at that time the roof looked good. You know, we always talk about looking at the outside to try to make a determination of what the interior looks like. So 319,000, that means the opening bid is starting around 20 cents, maybe a little less than that. And then we'll check and see what Redfin values it as well. Now, what's kind of interesting is that Zillow is actually valuing it less than the county is valuing it.
So they're about 80,000 over what Redfin's 80,000 over Zillow.
Well, in the county has a value of 365, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, or
Actually,
387.
387, yeah.
And so at least we have an idea that it has value. We're going to do a comparative market analysis. We're going to find properties that have sold right around this to really determine what we think the value is. And then, of course, get an idea. Now, The fact that there's only a 60-day redemption period increases the chances that you're going to be able to acquire the property. So in this case, we're going to do the same type of due diligence that we would with any type of tax deed. We're going to get an on-site evaluation here because those photos aren't going to be good for us. You know, we can't trust this photo from 2012 or even a photo from 2026. You know, something could have happened over the last month where, you know, suddenly what looks like a good investment that you're going to pay $100,000 for ends up being a bad investment because it's been burnt down.
Yeah, I think other than that though, the numbers are pretty good. It has good high value there. You know, with property valued around 400,000.
Yeah, now go look at another property on that list.
So that was the first property we're looking at right here. Here's the second property.
Yeah, go ahead and grab that. Kind of the same information, so you can kind of copy and paste that one.
Let me grab the parcel number.
And we'll go ahead and do another parcel search. You can see that the process is pretty simple. Now, once we do that, we decide that, hey, I do want to bid on this property. Well, that's where we're going to go through stage one. We're kind of going through stage one due diligence right now. We're going to go through stage two due diligence, then go through stage three due diligence, where we do on-site evaluations, we determine the market value, and then we set our high bid price based on what we think the market value is.
This one is a commercial property, you know, valued about 370 though.
See, it's on 0.14 an acre. As we scroll down, is there any additional information that we can see on? We can see it's an auto body, or at least that's what they have it recorded as, and they've owned it for quite a while.
Yeah, since 2000 or earlier.
Yeah, so about 25 years. We don't see any type of you know, zoning. I'm not zoning issues, but we don't. There's what the balance is on it.
Yeah, my goodness, the county balance is only 7,000. The school balance is 72,000.
That is ridiculous. So it's about $80,000 opening bid. And see what the property is there. We could also look at the GIS map as well and get an idea of where the property boundaries are.
Yeah, GIS body shop there.
So this photo is kind of old as well. These are actually older than most of the photos that you'll find. But what is interesting, it's a business. So we're going to look up and see, is this still in business? Is it vacant? When was it last in business? That's one of the big advantages with commercial property, is that if there was some type of business there, we could look up the business name, we could look up the address. I'll always do a Google search on the address and also the business name, the last business name, to see if I can find out, is it still in business? And if it's not in business, when was the last time I can see activity of business being there?
Yeah, this one looks like it. At least at the time of the photo, it was in operation. But that's what, you know, sending somebody by or getting new images of it could really tell us.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we could Google the name of that. We could Google the address as well and find out more about it. Let's look at maybe one more. Look at the next one down.
Can we see what this one opens up for? I guess it doesn't really tell us here, but let's see what the property is.
Yeah, the only way you can see it is through the county record information. So they don't have the opening bids pasted there, but we can see what it is when we look in the county records because we can see what's currently being owed.
So this one looks like it's a commercial, also valued pretty high here. So it's almost 1 acre here, but it looks like it's valued at 859,000.
Yeah, we can see that they got an, HVAC permit. We can see that there's some type of zoning verification process that was completed on it as well. We can see when it most recently sold for back in 2006. And that $110, that's it's essentially kind of hidden. And so, the last sale that we can see that actually took place was 60,000. It sold since then.
600.
Yeah, 600,000. It sold since then, but they did it in a way where they didn't have to put the full amount down. But we'd go ahead and look at the address, maybe look at the GIS map at the top. Kind of see what you can see recent sales as well. Up there at the top, we talked about looking into the different maps. That's the sales map that we could look for sold properties there. And then over on the left-hand side here, you can see zoning. You can go down there and click on the different base maps. So here they have zoning. So if we're looking at land, that may have a layer that we can click on to find out, what the zoning for that particular lot is.
Yeah, we can see the overhead image here on this one. Oh yeah, they do have, so it's an I there, I think, on it for
industrial.
Yeah.
Look at that address as well. This one may not have a street view. I can't remember if it did or not.
No street view here.
It's in an industrial park. You could probably get out there on Century Park and see what it looks like from there, but
down there, I think, yeah.
So it's in an industrial park, some type of big industrial building. And with commercial property like this, we would probably get on LoopNet or a website like that to find, good comparable properties. We really can't use something like Zillow for commercial property. But I would bet that it's worth over $1 million, $1.5 million. That's me just guessing. I looked quickly. It's some property. I didn't really look too far into it. But for commercial space, industrial space, some type of business, factory, smaller factory or warehouse, it really could be a good business. We'll look at some of the properties quickly that are coming up, and then we'll go ahead and answer any questions that you guys have. Go back up to the top and let's look at the ones that are taking place next month, just so we can see the difference between county properties. So these ones that we're looking at are being sold by the county. There's certain places in Delaware where cities will offer them as well. So as we're looking at the plaintiff, we can see which properties are going to be mortgage foreclosure properties. And then as we get down there, we can see the city of Wilmington. So these are going to be taxable parking. In fact, Shade, over there on the right-hand side, right below the name, you can click on that parcel number. The parcel number's right there. Oh, right there in the middle. Sorry, that 20. Sorry, no, it's between city of Wilmington. Yeah, that one. The other one's a parcel number as well, but to look it up, you can't have the dashes in there. And so we can look up any of these properties as well within the county and, see what the county records are.
Yeah, this one looks like it's a home, residential, valued at about 198. And yeah, just pull up the property address here on it.
Ooh, that's a little rough.
Yeah.
How bad's the rest of the street? Not too great across the street. As you get further down that other way, is it any better to the left down there. Now, this is back in 2020. These are some old street views. It would all depend on what the values are there. If they're valued at, 300,000, 250, 300,000, then maybe it's worth rebuilding them. But definitely in a property like this, we're going to look into the market and get an idea. We've looked at some areas like in Philadelphia where they're really rehabbing the properties. In fact, some of those to the left look like they were rehabbed a little bit.
Yeah, but
But
most of these look better, so, I mean, that was kind of the worst part. I'll bet probably one of the worst parts of town,
well,
at
and
least worst neighborhoods anyway.
the photos are also 5 years old. So
Yeah.
some of these areas where might have already started going through some type of revitalization effort. But there's a bunch of different properties that are coming up. This is really kind of one of those areas, if you live within Delaware, when we talk about location-based investing and opportunity-based investing. Opportunity-based are those auctions that are taking place one time a year, usually going to be, so maybe outside our area, but there's only one chance to bid a year. A location-based is states like Florida, Texas, Delaware that have multiple auctions a year. In this case, most of the counties have properties every single month. Now, not all, sometimes they'll skip a month or two, but there's usually going to be auctions every month between one of the 3 counties in Delaware. And there's only 3 counties that we're dealing with. So there is always opportunity there for you to go back. And if you live within Delaware or close to there, this may be a market that you want to look into because you have multiple chances to buy within that market each year.
Yeah, there's some interesting properties too. I mean, the mix of property types here could be worth going after. I mean, that kind of looks like that could be an interesting property. That's another one right there.
Well, and we don't have to spend a ton of time doing the research. Just something even as quick as a Google Street View, if we're looking at structured property, could tell us immediately if it's something we want to look more into. But it's not too bad. Let me look into the county record information. Let me look into the market value. And then we go through stage 1 due diligence. And if it's a property that we're interested in, depending on how quickly the auction is taking place, we'll either know that that's a property that we're going to research later, or if the auction's coming up, we'll go directly into stage 2 and stage 3.
All right.
But hopefully that gives you guys kind of an idea of, properties that are selling in Wisconsin, properties that are coming up in Delaware. What we're trying to do is expose you guys to different markets by looking at properties that are coming up for sale, properties that have sold, and showing you there is a ton of money to be made in tax sale investing. And there's also areas all across the country where you can take advantage of some type of tax sale investing strategy.
Yeah, in fact, I think it's getting easier, and counties are getting smarter about how they do things and about making it easier for investors to participate. We're seeing, more opportunities in general, more counties that are offering a variety of things, like rather than just their tax sale properties, they might offer foreclosures as well, even if they're a tax lien state. We're seeing counties get smarter about learning how to get these properties into the hands of new buyers, and that's ultimately good things for us, because it just means it makes our lives easier.
Yeah, definitely. Do we have any questions? Are we kind of
I know
them all?
I think we've been answering as we went here, so I think we've got everything covered. So I think that's it here for tonight. We appreciate all of you joining us here tonight. We will be back again here next week. You're welcome to join us again. We'd love to have you.
Yeah, thanks again, everyone. Have a great day.
We'll see you later.